Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney. And on today's show, we're going to take a look at the planning that really needs to go into audio. And one of the things we've noticed is that for a lot of people that do production, audio tends to be the last thing they do. They sort of get everything else looking great. And then they say, okay, now let me sort of bolt on the audio and get all that working. And this is sort of my making a case to say audio really needs to come to the front of that list in order to, have a lower stress type of production on your hands. Because let's face it, people will watch productions with marginal video, but poor audio is a killer and people will just leave. So getting audio right is really important. But before we get into that, I want to invite everybody, if you have any questions or comments, just post them below and we'll get them here live. Also, if you'd like to join us live, we have a link in the show notes and we'll post it up here on the screen that you can click on, and this will get you to the studio and we can bring you live on air to ask any questions you'd like about the topic of the day. All right. So let's jump in and get started with some of this. So, one of the things that I mentioned at the start is that we have a lot of issues. Audio is complex, and when you set audio up, there are a lot of variables that go into it. So, really, audio becomes a key part of the planning stage for putting a production together. It's not the sexy part, and it's not the part that, gives you the visual satisfaction, but it really is critical. So, let's think about how we do things with planning. And so, to get there, let's start with sort of what goes in when you start to plan a production. And there are really three main things that have to happen before I think you should start to dive in and look at what to do with audio. And the first is you're going to get requirements from the client. So that's an obvious one. And they're going to tell you exactly what they want in the production, how it's supposed to flow for them, what they want to get out of it, all of those things. And from that, you translate that into sort of the technical requirements. What gear, what resolution levels, what do I need to stream to, all of those things. And that gets sort of sorted out up front. And then the next thing that typically happens, at least a first draft, is a run of show. And what a run of show is, it's several things, but the main thing is it says what's going to happen in the show with very specific start and stop times. It's a very, very detailed, in most cases, a very, very detailed plan for the execution of the entire show. Now, it's not a technical plan. It's not telling people buttons to push and everything, but this will come back in a run of show and tell you, you know, these you have to have this audio queued up, and then we're going to play this audio as soon as this person walks on stage, and then we're going to, when they walk on stage, we're going to bring up these lights, and all of that stuff will be sort of timed out. And that's what your run of show is. But once you have that, now you have a really good understanding of what will need to happen with audio in all of these cases. So that's really where you get to the next piece in this, which is you'd start with who needs to get an audio feed. That's really our beginning piece. And for a lot of these things, it can be pretty obvious. So clearly your program is going to be whoever you stream to, whoever you, in this case, we're just saying we have three. We have a host, we have an in-venue presenter, and we have a remote presenter. Those are the people that are, our three main participants. We also have people in the venue. So you're sort of looking and saying we have a program, host, remote presenter, local presenter, in venue. But the other one, which isn't obvious, is something I put here because it's worth thinking about, is what I call a clean feed of audio. A lot of things you do for events and productions may have licensed audio and even potentially licensed video clips and things like that. You need to think about, if you're recording this and want to be able to reuse it at a future point, uh, you don't want to have those licensed elements included in the recording, because then you'd have to pay licenses or negotiate licenses in the future. So if you think about these things, putting that, do I need a clean feed, would be a question to ask yourself when it comes to thinking about what you need to set up for who needs to get audio and, potentially different feeds of that. And the next piece is, now that you've sort of, when you did that initial prep, you understood sort of technically how the physical layouts and other things would need to be handled. So this is the piece where, okay, I have these different people that need to get, or destinations that need to get an audio feed. How do I get it there? So you need to plan that out. So in this case, it could be things like vMix. I have things like Dante in here, but like there's an RDL device, which is something that would feed Dante to a headphone. And there are Shure devices that will feed Dante to XLR. So you could put that for in-venue speakers or, recorders or other things. So this is the point when you're sort of planning this, where you say, where do I need to get that source to in order to reach the destination I need to reach? So it's just really the first integration between the conceptual plan and the physical plan, which will be sort of done as a separate thread. But that gives you that link between the two. And when you have that done, then the next piece in this is you start to think of what are the audio sources that I'm going to have? And this is where you set up sort of your audio matrix of where my sources are and where my destinations are, and which destinations need to hear which sources. And so I start out when we're looking at this with I have three main sources: my host mic, my remote mic, and my presenter mic. And if you look across the top, you want those to basically go everywhere except back to themselves. So if you look at the matrix, we've excluded the presenter doesn't hear themselves, or the remote, or the host. And these three here are your effective mix minus. So by doing this sort of plan, the mix minus element becomes sort of obvious. And when you do actually implement this routing, you have a very clear plan around creating these mix minuses without thinking about them independently. You're not sitting there going, oh, and I have to do this for this part. It just is, no, this is routes that I just have to make sure I've mapped for everything. Now, we also have the potential for things like media files, videos, slides with audio, other things like that. And clearly, you probably want that to go everywhere. Every destination would want to hear what's going on there. And the music, that's where you could have things where maybe some of it is licensed. And so if you think about that licensed, you want to make sure that you're not sending that to your clean feed because, again, we mentioned that. We don't want to talk about licensing for a recording. That's a separate thing. And then, oh, excuse me. And then the last thing we have is producer talkback. So if you wanted somebody to be able to talk to your host, your in-venue presenter, your remote presenter, this is where those would have to be mapped out. And in these cases, this is probably something that would be dynamic. I would do push to talk to them and then take it off. So these may be something that we'd want to do some automation around. And that's really the next piece. Once we understand sort of the flow of audio. So who has to get it? How does it physically wire? What wire do I use to send it to them? And what sources do I need to send to them? Then you can start to think about, well, what automation may I need, potentially need for this. And the run of show is really going to be critical here because it's going to tell you what things do I have to get done at a hard time sequence. If I need to be able to switch things up between, an intro and lights on and mics live and all these things, and it has to happen within a 10-second window, that's probably something you'd want to automate, because you sit there and go, getting all those cues right and doing it manually could be very difficult. So those would be the types of things you think about automate, and the run of show really give you a good indicator for how that would work. So these are just some of the basic ones to think about, and we'll actually go through an implementation for all of these. But I just wanted to, sort of touch on, the concepts behind this. So things for managing IFB, the ability to talk to all the people that are participating in the show that you'll need to reach. So having automation buttons you could push to talk and to mute from them. If hosts are playing media files, you may need to do something where you can turn the host mics off, or more effectively, stop the host mic from going out to the audience, to the master feed, but still let them talk to their talent behind the scenes. So while a media file is playing, maybe it's a 60-second commercial or intro bumper or something like that, you could turn around and have the host and a remote guest sort of still talking in the background. And of course, you need to have ways to cue them that things are going on. If they're talking, they have to know the video's ending and you have to be quiet and we're going to unmute you and other stuff. So those are the types of things you may want to think about automating. Uh, the other piece is the ability to dial in audio levels. So while you may do that in the beginning and sort of get all of that right, from a levels point of view, you may turn around and say, I have multiple remote guests that are coming in. So I may need to make adjustments to their levels. And if you don't have an A1, somebody like running a mixer externally feeding into your vMix, then you may need to turn around and say, well, now I have to use something like a Stream Deck Plus with dials on it and be able to make adjustments. So both the signal coming from different remote presenters may need level adjustments, but also what they need to hear back. So, some of them may be younger with great hearing, some of them may be older like me with not great hearing, and they need different levels. So that's something you'd want to consider and make sure you had baked in. And the last thing that I'm probably going to touch on for automation is just the ability to turn around and say, I have a single button I can push to get all my audio settings back to where they should be right at from my beginning start point. So if something gets messed up and you have other automations that could have been going on, somebody exited an automation too soon or did something wrong, you can just press a button and your audio settings go back to a default good state that you can work from. So those are all the key elements around automation that, you know, there's a lot more you can do with automation. I'm just sort of giving you conceptual buckets that, when we look at it, the implementation for these later, you'll get, a sense of the types of things that you should be thinking about around your own automation requirements. So I have a few more slides, but before I do that, I just want to jump over and say hi to everybody that's, posted in the comments here. So, Sakara, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us here. That's great to see you. So, oh, uh, Bill Warren, William Warren, thank you very much for joining. I appreciate it. Oh, and you, the man, always good to see you. You, thank you for joining us for the show. Oh, and thank you for joining us. That's Philippides. I want to make sure I'm saying your name right, but Philippides, thank you very much for joining. Great to have you here. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about sort of will come after you actually do the implementation. So everything we sort of walked up to on this point was, what do I need to actually implement? But there are two more things I want to touch on, which would be what you do after you do that sort of first implementation. So if we jump in here, what I'd want to do is focus on testing and iteration. And though there could be other specific things that you'd want to touch on, these would be the four audio related things that I would always include in a testing checklist. So the first one is sort of getting to sort of unity gain, where you want to make sure that along your whole signal path, you're maximizing the audio signal, minimizing, your noise floor, and basically dialing in your audio all the way through so that the signal you have coming out is low noise and high signal. So something that is, strong. And you may need to make adjustments down the path. You may find that you have bad wiring, other things that could come into play that could cause interference. This is especially true if you are using wireless devices where you could have interference. So there may be things you'll need to do, changing frequencies and other stuff. But I call it the unity check, but it's really just making sure you have a good solid signal from source to destination for everything that needs to get a signal. The next thing is all around audio loops and feedback and other things. So you really need to have a test where everybody that's a destination, whether it's, a person or, the venue itself or other things, you need to actually test the audio that's coming out there. Make sure that when that person is speaking, they're not hearing themselves, which I mean, you didn't set up the routing correctly. You have a mix minus type error. It could be volume levels, speaker placement, where speakers are pointing at microphones, and you need to move either the speakers or the mics to make sure those types of issues don't show up. Uh, but it's really the point where you make sure you don't have any of those audio loops or echoes or things that would potentially cause feedback. Uh, the third thing, if you're dealing with remotes, is to make sure you understand the latency between what the guest hears and when they can respond. So, in most cases, with things like WebRTC, you can typically, keep your latency to under 100 milliseconds, like a tenth of a second. But even if it were like 200 or 250 milliseconds, that's still very much in the what I call the conversational level of latency. I can still talk to them and have them respond, and it feels like a natural conversation. Uh, when you go beyond that, then it can start to feel a little stilted, where I'm talking and then there's a long pause, and then they talk. And you also get the sense that you can't interrupt. You can't sort of jump in and try to make a point or clarify something. So understanding the latency with the particular uh, remote that you're bringing in lets you understand how to handle that during a production. You may turn around and say, I'm just going to have to send another type of cue, maybe a visual cue down with the signal they get to say, talk now, or other things like that. Or you'll have to understand that you can't be particularly conversational. You can't interrupt them or interject things. You have to sort of turn around and let them finish or cue them that you want to talk somehow visually without that latency. So there are elements here that may impact how you run the production. So understanding that latency is important. And there may be certain things you can do to correct that. It may be issues on an internet line or something of the sort that just need to be resolved. And that would give you a heads up to that as well. And then the last thing is if you put in automation, you really have to test the heck out of it. You have to think of all the different scenarios you could activate this in. Uh, any one of the automated tasks you have. You have to think of misfired things as well. So if I triggered one automation and then it was the wrong one and I press the second one, what will happen? Am I prepared for that? So there's a lot of like pre-planning that has to go in once you put automation in to make sure that everything is definitely understood and fully vetted. And again, you're not going to capture everything, and that's why you have things like an audio reset button to panic button to get you back. But you should at least understand all the main potential issues that you could have and sort of eliminate those on the automation side. And so the last thing before we get into doing the show in the show and tell here uh, is something that isn't directly related to audio, but is actually something that's very important. And for so many of the productions that I've gotten to see, we've had, different versions of our products in them, and I've gotten to see how this is done at that professional level. It's that every crew, every group of people that are putting on a production have a vocabulary that they all sort of use and acknowledge. In a live situation, especially, you don't want ambiguity, and you want to be able to give directions to each to people with very brief explanations behind them. So if you have somebody that's coming in as a remote, are they going to be a guest? Are they going to be a REM? Are they going to be a remote? Are they going to be my Zoom? What are they going to be? Those types of things need to be worked out so that when you actually are doing a production, those things become unambiguous. And so if I turn around and say, REM out of master, everybody understands. They're saying take the REM off the program bus and my remote guest off the program bus and hold it until I turn them and say, REM live. And then, what those. So these types of things that are constantly communicated back and forth by a crew, they develop naturally with experienced crews, where crews that have worked together for quite a while. But it is something, if there are specific elements or new elements that are going to be a part of a production that you're putting on, you need to make sure you all share a common vocabulary around how that should all work. All right, so that's the end of the slides and the tell part. So what I'd like to do now is really jump into the show part and go through everything I would do here for vMix and how I would set everything we just talked about up in vMix. But before we do that, I have somebody else who's came in. So we have Otis. Howdy, all from New Jersey. Good to see you, Otis. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Okay, so uh, let's jump over and start to look at how we think about this inside of vMix. So if we go through everything we sort of set up in our preliminary, what you do for the show planning, the first thing we said is who gets who has to get an audio feed. So that in vMix universe, that's really who needs a mix here. So as you see, we have different buses that are set up. And that's how you set up mixes inside vMix. And just to be sure, inside of vMix, if you go into the settings up there and click on audio outputs, these are all your buses. You don't always have them enabled. So you may have to turn around and make sure the buses you need are all enabled ahead of time. And the second thing that we talked about is when you have that bus enabled, what physical thing does that bus need to connect to, or virtual thing does it need to connect to in order to deliver the feed to that destination? And that's what comes in here. So right now you can see it says enabled, but every potential route, physical or virtual, that I can send this bus to is listed here. So I could do things and say, I'm going to send it like a VB audio cable. Say I have a local recorder. That could be what I'd set up for my clean feed. You have Dante. So we have all the DVS outputs. We have, speakers, things that we could be feeding things out if we had in-venue speakers that were hooked up to this computer that you're running vMix on. So you could just have something that's direct through an audio interface, or you could have other devices, So when we have these things set up, this is where you'd map all of those hardware or virtual software devices to and get that set up. And that's really the first piece of this. Do I have all of the buses I need enabled? And have I set them all up to go to the correct routes that they need to end up at the destinations they need to get to? So that's the first piece that we do. Then the next piece, which we had, was sort of doing the routing of audio. What we had for that is all the sources, and that's what you see. So all the inputs that I set up here in vMix, these all potentially can generate audio. So so you can sort of see that I have my host, guest, presenter. That's sort of my remote there. I have slides or other media that I play back. I have music. I have talkback, which I can sort of turn on and off. So I want to make sure I don't have a producer talking to people while they're live. I have my slides, which could be, and I have other things like I have signals and other elements that I have in here, which I can use to cue things. But so you see all those audio sources are what's coming in as my inputs. And, the way I broke this up, because it has a nice split here, but these are all my outputs on the top, and these are all my inputs now going across the bottom of the screen. And so the way you can do this is you can sit there and look at the bottom here, and these are all the buses that are available up here. So these are my outputs. So I'm using A to E in this case. So by turning around and clicking M, that's sending the host mic to my master output. By clicking the B and the C, it sends the host mic to the remote and the presenter, and so on. And I have all that set up for all of these. And that's how you do sort of that routing matrix. And that's exactly what you do. So if you look at the way that matrix was set up, this is basically telling me which one of these do I click on and which do I leave off. The X's were the leave off and the ons were to set. One of the things, though, that is possible when you're using some advanced things, so you can have NDI feeds that may be coming in that can have 6 audio channels, maybe different language channels or other things that you have. So in that, you can't really do that through this interface. But there is another element if you go in. So if you click on the gear, let's just say for host, another element we have here is something called the channel matrix. Now, if this were an NDI feed that had 6 audio tracks in it, I would see the numbers 1 to 6 across here, and I could then turn around and say, which audio which of these 6 audio tracks then would I want to go to master left, to master right, to headphones left, and all of the things that I have as buses that are set up here. So that's sort of the other element. So when we talk about the routing, you get that multiple ways to do it. The common way and what will work for most people is just clicking the buttons down here to do the routing. But you may need it for more complex situations to jump into these individually and do that through the channel matrix. The other thing you'll notice, and it's not something that I've seen everybody do, but it's a very good idea, is you should name all of the buses for who their intended destination is. So if you're using these things, you should just go in and make sure these buses are very clearly named. And this helps prevent mistakes from just, oh, was B the presenter or was B the remote? You just, if you look down, you see B is the remote area. And I don't have a question about that. And you could just go in there and there is a name section. So normally this is blank. But if you go in here, I could sit there and these ways I put a little dash so you get the letter, dash, and then the name. So this just gives you another easy way when you set all this up to make sure you have this aligned correctly and everything looks good with this. So once you have that done, you have all your inputs routed to the correct outputs. The outputs, the buses are all named and they're all routed to the correct hardware. Then the next thing you start to think about is, do I have the signals coming in right? And let me talk a moment about audio levels and the different ways when you sort of set things up to figure, what's the right setting to have initially. So all of my inputs, when I think of this, what I really want is I want to make sure they're balanced with each other. As loud as possible in terms of what I'm hearing coming in so that I have a lot of signal to work with without a lot of noise in it. So I want to make sure they're as loud without noise as I can get them coming in. So clean, loud audio, basically. And I want to get them mixed relative to each other so they all sound balanced. So if my presenter is talking with my host, their voices should sound like they're at the same level, and the same with the remote. That should sound like at the same level. They may be coming in at different audio levels. Then I would need to make that adjustment. But it should be that when they are fed out, they sound sort of harmonious together. They sound like they are just two people or three people talking conversationally. And there's not big jumps in volume or things that would jar you from feeling like, oh, they just changed, sources or mics or other things. And that's true for media as well. You don't want, the presenter to, go and start to play a video and the video is screaming loud or way too soft and people can't hear. So you want to get all of those things balanced with each other. And once you have that balance, then what people hear can be controlled with the level in the mix, in the bus that you have. So you can turn around and make sure that the audience is hearing the appropriate overall level, or the host or anybody else. And the mix itself, the relative mix, is already set. The relative mix is done on the inputs. The volume needed for somebody that's listening at a destination is determined inside of the buses. And so when you start to think about audio, that's a good way to break it up. And the other thing to think about is that you could have your host and your remote and your presenter all want different volume levels in their earpiece. So they may need to hear at different levels. They have different, hearing tolerances, different hearing acuity, and that would be represented by what they want to hear back. And other things like the audience, you're sort of balancing for the room. So you may turn around and say, I'm trying to do something which isn't blowing the people in the front seats out, but is still audible to the people in the rear seats. For most venues, that's not an issue. And if you have more advanced PA systems, that's something they could handle pretty cleanly. But whatever it is, you want to make sure you have all these as independent levels you can send out. And so when the host can't hear something, your impulse should be to increase the host submix, the host bus level, and not adjust what they can't hear down in the input level, because those should stay balanced and pretty much not need adjustments. Uh, but speaking of that, if you are doing things where you have different people that are coming in, different presenters, different uh, remote guests that are coming in, you may need to do some adjustments for those. And so I actually, when we do automation next, I'll talk about how we set that up so you can adjust the different audio levels uh, on the inputs as well as the outputs right from like a Stream Deck Plus, which is what I'm using here to do that. And that will give you sort of an easier way when you do need to change it and you don't have an A1 or somebody running the whole production from a mixer. That will give you an easy way to do that. So we'll get into that next. And I think we're probably in a good place to jump over to automation and what we need to do with automation. So let's start with, the basics. And probably the thing that everybody's going to use is they're going to have intercom foldback, which is the ability for a producer or somebody in the control room to talk to talent that is on air. So the way we implement this is on the Stream Deck. If I press a button, that sends one trigger, and I can use that to trigger a shortcut or a script. Uh, but when I release that button, that can trigger another shortcut or script. So the button down is one, the button up is the second. So the way I've done this, this is one of the sort of shortcuts that I set up, which is if I wanted to talk to all of them at once. I have an IFB for all my host, producer, and remote guest. What I will end up doing is I will turn the audio on for the talkback. And when I do that, I will then turn the audio, the buses that the talkback input goes to bus A, B, and C, which are the host, the remote, and my presenter. So what I'm doing when I push this button down is I'm basically turning on the talkback mic from the producer, and I'm routing that talkback mic to the outputs that are going to the host, guest, remote guest, and presenter all at once. And when I release that button, it triggers the off script for everybody. And that's now turning the audio off for the talkback. So their mic is no longer live, it's muted. And then going in and unrouting it to the three buses that we had. So it's basically turn it off. It's no longer going to that bus. So you really, in this single on off button push, you have a push to talk that you set up. And you can do this for any one of these individually. Like if I just wanted to set this up to talk to the host, it would just be the first two lines here, where you go there and say, that's how I start talking to the host, and that's how I sort of shut off talking to the host. And, it's very, very sort of simple, but these are the sorts of things. And this is something that I probably everybody that's going to be doing this type of talkback would need this sort of automation script. And very simple. It's stuff that you could do in a script start dynamic or as a full script and just assign that to a button on a Stream Deck and you'd be good. The other thing that we have is I wanted to show you something that would give you a more complex view of the types of automations you can do, but it's really just a placeholder for your own thoughts for how you would like to implement some of these things. But it's something for playing media. And let me sort of, I think I have something I can show you here. So one of the things that, let me sort of cut to this so we can pop this in. Let me actually take the output here. And what we did is when I play a media file, what I wanted to do was to turn around and say, if this is a longer media file, say it's like a 60-second or 90-second, intro clip that I want to do, what I want to be able to do is stop the host, the remote guest, and the presenter, stop their audio from going out to the master bus. But still let them talk to each other. So I don't just want to mute them because they may want to turn around and sort of do last minute. Okay, when this ends, we're going to start to talk about this, and whatever it is that they would want to do uh, behind the scenes, sort of behind the curtain. So that would mean you don't want their audio going out master, but you'd still want them to be able to talk to each other. But then when you get to like 5 seconds left in the video, you wanted to send them an indicator that stop talking now, the video's almost over, and then reactivate their routes out to the main feed when you are, here going to go live again. So I did that by setting up triggers against the playing back of the media file. So the media files could be a list, and you have a bunch of media files queued up. And the trigger is going to do the following. When the media file starts to play, and I know this is a little tight to see, but when the media file starts to play, I'm going to turn the buses off so the stuff won't go out the master bus. This could also be things that go even beyond that, where you could sit there and go, I don't want it to go into the audience in the venue. I don't want it to go, to potentially other destinations that you could set up. It doesn't, however you'd want to do that. This would be I'm turning off the route that these could take out to a specific destination, but I'm not muting them. At that point, they can all talk to each other. It's not going out where you don't want it. And then here I have, which is a new shortcut that was added in vMix, on playback remaining, which says, in this case, when there are 5 seconds left in the media file that's playing, I want you to do something. In this case, I want to play an audio signal out, which is just a beep that goes out to the guest. Inside of vMix, I have an input, which is that audio beep that's set up, and it is routed to go to the host, the guest, and the presenter. So whenever I do that play, it sends a beep out just to those people so they hear that beep. Then when the media file finishes playing, I sort of do a fancy transition back to the host, and then I play the signal again, which is sort of my second notice. We're live, and then I turn on everybody's bus route back to the master or wherever else I wanted to go, the venue or whatever, and that goes out. So this is just a general example of something, but the automation in this case was just built into triggering shortcuts inside of a playback of a media file. And so you could do this and say, for my longer media files, I'd have an input which has this sort of script that would go there. And for shorter ones, I could have that a separate list where I just play those out and the host stays live. Or I could have things that you want, like a presenter may turn around and say, I want to play something which has audio in it, but I still want to be talking. So you can, but this is going to start to inform how you structure these things. And this is, again, one of those reasons why I say planning this audio is important early on. Because if you realize these are things you want to do, this could be very difficult if you put all of your media files into one big list input, but you wanted to treat certain media files differently from others in terms of how you handle the audio around them. So there's different things that, different reasons behind suggesting doing these things up front. And that's one of those, things to keep in mind as you start to plan automation. Now, the other thing I mentioned is that you could end up having different presenters and different guests come in, and you may need to deal with different audio levels for that. And so this is something that I'm not really set up. I don't have a camera over here to show this, but let me actually just go to vMix over here, and I'll do that. Showing from how I set this up in vMix. So what I'd want to do is I want to get into the shortcuts. Oops, sorry. So if I go in and look at shortcuts, what I have something set up here is, let's put this in the middle, might be able to get a better shot. What is the remote volume what is the volume for the remote and volume for the presenter? And what is the return volume for the remote and for the presenter? And so in doing this, I'm using something first called set volume. And that's how you actually control an input volume, is with the shortcut set volume. But one of the cool things is that if I were to sort of click on this and you look here, what this is tied to is a Stream Deck dial rotate. So in doing this, I am setting up something which lets me effectively have a dial control my volume level. And if you look at how this executes inside of vMix, because I had that for the set volume, which is for the inputs, and I had that for set bus volume. So bus B and bus C are the two, and I had those set up. But if you look inside of vMix itself, if I'm going and changing the remote guest, which is here, I can turn around and say, let me change their input volume. And I'm just turning a dial here on the Stream Deck. And then I can also turn around and say, well, let me change the return volume that they're getting. And I'm doing that just through uh, the dials on the Stream Deck. The other thing is there is sort of a multi-function thing you can do with Stream Deck buttons where if I press a dial, I can switch it to do something else. So the way I set this up is I have on the same dial the remote volume and the presenter volume. And I have this remote return and the presenter return. So just by pressing the dial on the Stream Deck Plus now, I can now make adjustments to the presenter now. So just by making that, you can see I'm adjusting the presenter volume, and I can go back and I can adjust the remote guest volume. So it makes it very easy now using a simple control interface to make these types of volume adjustments. And because you have things like, the Stream Deck Studio, which gives you dials and other things, these are things that you could actually map to a producer in another location. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person who's switching. So you could do things where you have dial controls that you could use to make these sort of level adjustments that would now be, something a producer directly could do outside of the person switching the show. And they could get those things right because they'll be the person that will probably prep a guest or, bring on remote talent and other things like that. So you could have them do all that stuff. Or, with the new network interfaces on the Stream Decks, you could do that from a remote position. It wouldn't have to be tied directly to a switcher position where a technical director is doing it. So that's another thing to consider. And sort of going along with that is something that I think should always be on the radar. It's having a quick get back to my baseline working audio. So if I come in here and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and change all my routing here. And just I stomped all over it, and now nothing is set up the way it should be because I changed all of my outputs. I have a single button now that I can press called my audio reset, which when I press this now, all of these are set to their sort of safe default state. So you can have multiple different types of audio resets. So you could have sort of panic buttons where you turn around and say, I just want to let the host audio go up because I've got other problems that I need to fix. I can have one that's sort of reset to my start position, my initial position, which gets everybody back to the way they were when the production started. So I have a known working state that I could work against. And there could be other sort of specialty panic buttons you have to do other things, even things like switch audio and video to another media file that maybe is just playing as we're having a technical issue, please stand by with some music that's going out the main. So different things you could do for these types of panic buttons for audio and a production in general. But these are something you should definitely bake into your automation plan. If for no other reason, and it gives you a great way to do these types of quick resets. And if you are doing things like doing your testing, where you are having automation that you may interrupt in midstream or press two buttons side to side before one is finished, and it could put the system in an unknown state, it gives you a very quick way to just reset that. So when you're doing your audio testing, you'll know that at the start of every test, I reset everything and I know it's in a good working state. Again, another tool to help with testing. And so I think that's another thing to do. Let me just quickly show you how I did that, because it seems like that may involve a lot of stuff, but it really was more cut and paste with a script file that I set up. But over here is the script file, and it basically is just taking and saying, here's my initial host audio setup that I want to work with. And so I'm just turning on what buses are on. You can turn certain buses off. I didn't do everything here for this, but you get the sense of this is just making sure that, you know, I am initializing the host audio, the remote audio, the presenter. All these things are just set up in their base audio states. And, this gives me that sort of single button push, but by and large, this is just a cut and paste. I cut this and change a few things in them uh, to, change what what buses I'm impacting and which inputs I'm handling here. But it makes it very easy. So you can. It may seem like a big task, but you set up the first one, and that becomes your template. And then you just paste it and make small changes for all of them. Save that as a script, and then tie the script to a button you can just push, and you're golden. You always know you have a known state to get back to. Okay, so that was everything I wanted to cover here. And I know this was a slightly different show, but it's something that I thought I want to focus a lot more as we go forward on more real world production things. It can still involve scripting and other types of preset configurations and graphics and other things, but I want to make sure I'm covering enough of the real implementation details that would help make the types of things we're describing in Streaming Alchemy viable in a real production environment. So that was really what I wanted to touch on in today's show. But this, again, this is stuff that hopefully this is all useful to you as well. And even if you do a lot of these things, just having some thought process behind new things you could do. Hopefully, I inspired or instigated some thinking on that front. That will get something going there. So, what I do, I have a few more comments. I'll get to those as we jump into the post show. But I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us here. This will probably be our last show this year because with Christmas and the holiday season coming up, that's something that I'm going to be both busy with work and busy with family commitments. So I won't be able to get another show in this for the rest of this year, but we will kick off the new year with a new show. And we are, I'm going to start talking more about our plans for season 6 because we have a lot of that. So if you're not going to be here for the post show, thank you for taking the time to watch the show. And I wish all of you, whatever holiday you celebrate, have a very happy, very relaxing holiday season. And if you are going to hang around, I'll see you in a few moments in the post show. Take care. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the post show. So, thank you for Philippides. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the ability to play media files and do that stuff in the background, it's a great thing. You could actually have files that could play back things like live, off air, just pre-recorded words. So you could just sort of treat those things as little cue clips that you could have, or even things like countdowns, especially because you have things like time left. So you could have a time left where you could have an audio voice that says live 5, 4, 3, 2, quiet, and then it just switches live. So you could do like count people in and other things like that using these types of techniques where you just, if you're doing automation for these like show intros and bumpers and other stuff, you can do a lot of those things. So yeah, I mean, the ability to play audio files, I think, is a great thing. I mean, vMix has so many really cool elements to it that you can start to leverage in creative ways. I am always impressed by what they do. So thank you for sharing that. So yes, William, audio reset is one of those things where it is a really valuable thing. It's not something you think about. One of the sayings I had: the first guy that invented a parachute probably never lived to invent it, and it's sort of true with these types of things. At that moment, you really wish you had an audio reset. You that your motivation was because you didn't have one. And this is the same sort of thing. When you have this sort of thing, it just gives you that extra peace of mind. And sort of in the description for the show, I said it lower stress productions. Every live production has stress. There's just a lot of things that are going on simultaneously that all have to go right. But having these types of fallbacks, that plan B, where something didn't go right, but I have an easy way to recover or an easy thing to do until I get what I wanted done. Uh, that's one of the things I learned. And I can tell you where I got like the first real introduction. This is basically when we started this company. We we got to sit in on a production at Major League Baseball, and I got to see how calm an incredibly complex production was handled because they had so many different contingencies and recovery mechanisms all set up and in place. So nobody was sitting there with a what do I do? When anything happened, they knew this is exactly what I'm going to do. And it was all sort of scripted out ahead of time, even the contingencies. And that was the first real exposure to where I had, and you're talking productions like that where they have 25 cameras and audio coming from all different sources and stats and data coming in and remote people connecting in, all sorts of things. So to see that sort of thing put in practice was an eye opener for me, and that was over 10 years ago, and that made me a real believer in making sure you have these sort of plans in place. And so, yes, that's something I think a lot of different ways to apply that in what we have here. Just and it's not just audio. So many other things for graphics and video, and how do you handle uh, feeds that drop off and remote guests that can't connect the way you wanted them to, and all these types of things that you're gonna at some point in a production you're gonna run into, and having that plan in place is always cool. So. Okay, so when I put this together, and I really welcome any feedback everyone has, uh, I put the slides together more as a way to sort of organize things visually that I was talking about. So it just wasn't me talking. But uh, if there are other ways you'd like to see me present these types of things besides slides, let me know. Uh, in a live setting, it's somewhat limiting. There are definitely things that I want to. Oh, Otis, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you as well. It is. I appreciate everybody that joins the show live, that comments and engages. It makes all of this so worthwhile for me, and I hope the things that we're doing here on the show are worthwhile for all of you as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So, but one of the things, and I've mentioned this before, one of the things that I'm probably going to start to do for a variety of reasons in our next season of Streaming Alchemy are going to be producing more pre-recorded videos. And a part of that is some of these things where, I resort to slides more in a live. I can do more things that are more animated and more sort of logical, paint on as the different elements come in. Uh, so when I talk about different topics, that may make it easier for people to, pick up what I'm saying and create a more logical explanation visually. So, but any things that you have for suggestions on how I could make those types of things clearer, I definitely welcome that, because there's a lot of different sort of foundational things that aren't like beginner or basic things, but things around optimizing audio, things around lighting, things around graphics, things around, production automation that are go to that next level of the types of things you're going to want to add to more complicated productions. Uh, those things can require some visual explanation as well as just me just talking up here. So I want to make sure I do it in a way that's accessible to everybody, and provide some real value. So feedback on all of that, you can add them as comments, or just message me inside of the Facebook group for the Streaming Alchemy group on Facebook, or DM me, directly that way. But definitely interested in all of your feedback. So I guess that's about everything. I know this has been a longer show for this type of show, but I hope everybody enjoyed it. And as I said, holiday season coming up, so we won't get to get together again this year, but very start of next year, we will have a another live show planned that we'll all connect on. So for the holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate, please enjoy, relax, spend time with family, friends, and eat a little more than you should. So you can you can at least enjoy it fully without too much too much burden of dieting or anything else. Uh, so until next year, be well, take care, and I'll see you all then. Happy.